There's a specific detail in this story, tucked away in a 4 a.m. Truth Social post, that everyone is looking at, but almost no one is talking about. While the mainstream networks are screaming about economic chaos and diplomatic betrayal, they're missing the geometry. President Trump isn't just talking about trade, he's talking about angles, meets, and bounds. He's talking about a system called the Dome. Welcome back to the brief. On Saturday, the geopolitical world didn't just shift, it fractured. The United States has officially issued an ultimatum to 8 of its closest allies. Hand over the sovereignty of the world's largest island, or watch your economies bleed out through a 25% tariff wall. Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, the Netherlands, and Finland. They've been given until February 1st. The question isn't whether this is fair or legal. The markets have already decided it's neither. The question we're asking today is, why Greenland? And why, in the middle of a fragile 2026 recovery, would the White House risk a total rupture of the Western alliance for a piece of ice? There's a mystery here, and it's not about real estate. It's about what's under the ice and what's above the atmosphere. The official narrative you're hearing on cable news is simple. Trump is obsessed with legacy. He wants the ultimate deal. He wants to be the man who grew the American map for the first time since 1959. But look at the actual data. Less than 8 months ago, this administration signed a gold standard trade pact with the UK. 6 months ago, it was a new era deal with the European Union. And now, those deals aren't worth the digital ink they were signed with. Ask yourself, why now? The White House claims this is a response to security threats. They point to a handful of European troops journeying to Greenland for purposes unknown. Now let's apply some rational skepticism. Those troops were part of Arctic Endurance, a pre-planned multinational NATO exercise. Everyone knew about it. The Pentagon knew about it. The Kremlin knew about it. But suddenly, the White House is framing this as a dangerous situation for the survival of our planet. It's a classic pivot. You take a routine military exercise and rebrand it as a hostile foreign incursion to justify a pre-planned economic strike. Apparently, the only thing more dangerous than a global trade war is a few Danish soldiers having a snowball fight in Mook. The official narrative says we are protecting the Dome, our new missile defense shield. But if you look at the markets, they are pricing in safety. They are pricing in coercion. Wait, look at this document on your screen right now. This is the projected tariff schedule released via the Treasury's emergency guidance. February 1st, 2026, a 10% blanket tariff on all goods from the Greenland Eight. June 1st, 2026, the rate jumps to 25%. This isn't a negotiation. It's a ransom note with a 4-month fuse. And notice who's on the list. It's not just Denmark, it's the industrial heart of Europe. Germany's car industry, France's aerospace sector, the UK's services. By targeting the Greenland Eight, the administration is effectively putting a gun to the head of the entire European economy. Look at this chart. Usually, when the US starts a trade war, the dollar spikes because of safe haven flows. But look at the 2026 January trend. The dollar is dropping. In the last 48 hours, the greenback has hit a 6-month low against the Swiss franc and the yen. Why? Because for the first time in the post-war era, global investors are viewing the United States not as the policeman of the system, but as the source of the risk. When you weaponize the global reserve currency to buy a country that isn't for sale, people start looking for a different currency. Now, let's get to the hidden details the mainstream media is ignoring. Greenland isn't just ice. It's the world's largest untapped reserve of rare earth elements, REEs. Neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium. The stuff that makes your iPhone vibrate and your EV go 400 miles. Right now, China controls 90% of the processing for these minerals. In October 2025, Trump and Xi Jinping had a summit. They reached a ceasefire. Suddenly, the US stopped attacking Chinese tech, and China stopped complaining about US chips. The hidden incentive: if the US controls Greenland, it breaks China's monopoly on the 21st century economy. Extracting these minerals in an Arctic wasteland takes decades and billions in infrastructure. The EU knows this. They've already moved to activate their anti-coercion instrument, the so-called trade bazooka. France's Macron is leading the charge. They aren't just talking about retaliatory tariffs on bourbon and Harley Davidsons anymore. They are talking about blocking US tech firms from the single market. We are looking at the total balkanization of the Western economy over a real estate dispute that looks like something out of a 19th century history book. So, what are the hidden incentives here? Let's be dryly honest. This isn't about the dome. The dome defense system is a multi-billion-dollar project that requires specific radar angles only available in the high Arctic. But the US already has Thule Air Base in Greenland. We already have the angles. So what's the real why? By demanding the complete and total purchase of Greenland, the White House creates a demand so absurd that it makes any other concession look reasonable. It's the anchor effect. If I ask you for $100 billion and you say no, and then I ask you for $10 billion, you're more likely to say yes. The White House doesn't necessarily expect to fly the stars and stripes over Nuke by June. They want the Europeans to blink on something else. They want the EU to drop the Digital Services Act. They want the UK to align with US food standards. They want a total European decoupling from China. The irony is, by using Greenland as a bludgeon, we are driving the Europeans straight into the arms of the one country we're trying to isolate. China is already offering alternative rare earth processing partnerships to Denmark. We are playing 4D chess, but we might be accidentally checking our own king. Predicting the narrative shift for next week, watch for the media to move away from trade war and towards sovereignty crisis. By Thursday's emergency EU summit, you're going to see a unified European front. The Greenland Eight will likely expand to the EU 27. The narrative will shift from Trump the dealmaker to the end of NATO. Keep an eye on the US Supreme Court, too. There's a case sitting there right now, waiting for a decision next week on whether the president can use national security to bypass Congress on tariffs. If the court rules against the White House, the Greenland ultimatum evaporates in a heartbeat. If they rule for the White House, buckle up. We're going back to the 1930s, but with better Wi-Fi. They rely on the algorithm to bury this. They want you focused on the shouting and the outrage, so you don't look at the data, or the dome, or the mineral charts. If you want to help us fight the suppression of actual analysis, you know what to do. Hit the like, subscribe to The Brief, and share this with someone who still thinks this is just about legacy. This was the DC Daily Brief.